putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
I've worked with a lot of couples and a lot of guys, and I've seen a lot of relationships from the inside. And you got to have at least these three things.
All right. Well, then let's dive a little bit into clarity, maturity, and stability, because I want to know anecdotally, what kind of things, like what kind of examples can I see in a relationship for, if she does this and then I say this, and how does the situation go where I can zero in on these qualities and say, okay, she embodies this or she lacks this?
The ability to just work through a problem. When couples come to me and they're dealing with whatever problem it is, they're fighting over the dog, or they're fighting over the in-laws, or they're fighting over someone had an affair, whatever it is, I'm really more concerned with how they're talking about it. And so one of the biggest things is when you get into an argument with this woman, how does the argument go? Is it short, brief, and productive, or does it go on? And does it never end? Is she bringing in everything that's ever happened? Just that ability to stay focused on the issue and try to seek a solution.
Okay. Yeah. In my past, I've been in situations where, there's no clarity. It becomes just a big show.
Right.
You try to approach a situation with upfront, direct, nothing attacking, you're a bad person because of this. Just, I would appreciate it if we would do this, or if you would do this, or if you not do this. Nothing goes further than that until it gets to the other person's ears, and then it becomes, you hate me, I'm a bad person, and you're wrong. It's actually you that's the aggressor in this case, and I can't believe you're saying these things to me.
Yeah, for sure. And you got to be mindful that us men need to be mindful that women communicate a little differently. They see things differently. In general, we tend to focus on the here and now and getting toward a solution. And in general, they tend to focus more on themes. And one of the big complaints men have about women is that if she's mad at me about this one thing, then she brings up all these other seemingly unrelated issues from the past. And it's not necessarily that women are always trying to punish us or be manipulative. It's that they're seeing a larger theme that needs to be solved, whereas we're seeing a discrete incident that needs to be solved. And so if a man and a woman can get that we're coming from these different perspectives, then it works out fine.
I will be honest, it's possible that because I was raised by my mom in this way, but I'm also very theme oriented too. Yeah. So, that could be a reason, but at the same time, I can also zero in on a specific circumstance, get into the mud, get into the nitty gritty of a circumstance, and decide, okay, where did we just go wrong? Figure that out. To me, that is a good part. To me, that is an important part of clarity and making sure that fights end productively. Is there anything else about that you want to add before going on to maturity?
About clarity. I think I already talked about, there's one quality that I really haven't talked about that's really important, and that's inquisitiveness. And this falls under the heading of clarity and communication is she inquisitive? So if you come to her with a complaint or she's angry about something, does she jump to conclusions and respond to what's going on in her head and the story that her head is telling her? Because we all have that. Or does she focus her attention outward onto the situation and onto you and asking honest, curious questions about what's going on with you and what's going on with the situation? So is she attending to reality, or is she attending to the story in her head? It's a very important thing to look for.
Absolutely. I'm going to need to hire you after we're done with this. All right, maturity. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that is a big one. I'm really glad we're going into the weeds on this, because this triad, it's not going to stand without each of these. So let's talk about maturity.
Maturity, probably one of the most important characteristics for a man to look for in a woman, and vice versa. This applies equally well to women, is an internal sense of control over the world, internalizing responsibility, versus a person who is always a victim of what's going on. The fault is always somebody else's. If you've dated somebody who every boss they've had has been a jerk, well, they're probably not a very good employee, but they're not seeing it. Or every landlord they've had has ripped them off. Well, they probably have ripped off their landlord, but they're not seeing it. And here's a really big red flag. If you're dating somebody and every one of their previous boyfriends or husbands fell from grace and became the bad guy, well, guess what's going to happen to you? That's what's in your future. So finding somebody who can internalize responsibility for what's happening in their life and where they're headed, and not shift the blame outward.
Yeah, I've definitely been in that circumstance too, where, you are the on this pedestal. They love you. They want to spend the rest of their lives with you. And then the next second, something, but when they talk about other people, it's like, oh, that person's such a piece of shit. That person's a piece of shit. My mom's a piece of shit. My dad's a piece of shit. Everybody's a piece of shit. And they project all their feelings. And I swear, I mean, this is one of those moments when I was reading your book that I was like, I had this feeling like 10 years ago when I was in this really terrible, terrible relationship. And if I had just acknowledged it, then I would have saved me a lot of heartache where, literally from one day to the next, I became the enemy, the bad person. And to fall from grace like that, it's like when someone puts you up on a pedestal, it's a tough fall. And, a lot of times, look, men are emotional too. These things affect us as well. And if I had stayed with that woman, it would have been a nightmare. It would have been hellish. My mom says I dodged a bullet with that one.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure. And that sounds like, I'm like you, I'm not going to diagnose somebody from afar. So I don't know the woman, don't know what her story was. But when you get that sense that you are being idealized beyond what you would expect in the honeymoon phase, you're always going to be idealized in the honeymoon phase, but when it feels a little excessive to you and you feel like, oh my God, there's only one way to go and it's down. And you get that sense that 1 minute you're the good guy, and the next minute you're the bad guy, and there's not much gray area, or the people in her life are all good guys or bad guys, and she's not viewing people as a mix of qualities and complex individuals, then you got to start wondering a little bit about just some basic characterological features.
I agree 100%. And it's one of those things that's hard to get away from, especially as a man. We like to have our egos stroked. So when someone tells you, I love you, I've never loved anybody like you before, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, I want to be with you for the rest of my life, and blah, 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 the whole entire bit, and you just had one date or two dates, then, anyway, I totally understand what you're saying. And it has been alarming in the past when that kind of stuff has happened. But guys will be guys, I guess, and this is exactly why we're here, so we can figure out exactly what to do when these things happen. Let's talk a little bit about stability. In the book, I have a basic little primer on personality disorders and depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and unresolved emotional injury. And the reason I talk about this is that anybody who's going to go out into the dating arena needs to have some basic knowledge about mental health. And this isn't about diagnosing anybody, and this isn't about treating anybody, because it's not your business to diagnose or to treat anybody, but not you personally. But if you're out dating somebody, it's just not productive to diagnose and treat. But having some basic understanding of what to look for with things like depression, anxiety, because they're out there. And the reason men need to be particularly mindful of this is because men and women do depression and anxiety slightly different on average. We show different signs when we're depressed, and so we don't always recognize it in the other gender. They don't recognize it in us, and we don't recognize it in them. So it's really important to know what to look for, and knowing what kind of questions to ask when you're dating somebody. Just like I'm a big advocate that women should be inquisitive about men. Well, we need to be inquisitive too. We need to ask questions like, so what was it growing up around your house? What was that like? And how are your parents and what's going on there? And being very inquisitive about her history and her state of mental health and how she handles things, so that if there's a red flag, then you can follow up and ask, well, are you getting some help with this? Right. I definitely want to dive deep into that, because that's actually one of the things I've been saving. It's a very fascinating subject to me: borderline personality, histrionic personality, depression, anxiety. So that's some of the stuff I've suffered with. Some of the stuff, it's short of being a psychiatrist or a psychologist, it's like I'm looking at it in black and white. When you look at the symptoms and the effects of these disorders, in some ways, being in an interpersonal relationship and seeing the day-to-day functions of people, you're even more. I mean, if you're keen, then you can be even more. You can have even more insight than probably even a doctor. Though I wouldn't try to diagnose, I would definitely send someone to a doctor, but being aware of that kind of stuff is really important. But first, let's talk a little bit about some of the negative qualities that you should just look out for right away, that people are that people can be blinded to by the hormones in the beginning of a relationship, and then tie you down and lock you into a relationship that is going to cause unhappiness. Again, we are here with Dr. Sean Smith, the writer of A Tactical Guide to Women. We are going to talk some more with him because this, let's face it, this is some very, very fascinating stuff. I am Brett Segal, the Disgruntled Millennial, subbing in for the great Kevin Jackson. I broadcast to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. And after we're done with this interview with Dr. Sean Smith, I'm going to be free from bad relationships. We'll be right back. You're definitely going to want to stay tuned for more. Get me at Shaq General on Twitter.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.